It's kind of weird how people still have an issue with this after the first chapter of the recently started, and even more recently, concluded, Jump manga, Time Paradox Ghostwriter. Craftsdwarf from the past! This is Craftsdwarf from the future! Time Paradox Ghostwriter didn't end recently anymore! Just saying. But while I can understand it from the angle of value and creative property ownership, I also can't help but feel that there's a lack of understanding of both the material itself and the manga industry as a whole, which Ghostwriter intrinsically beds itself in. Plagiarism in itself is the act of taking someone else's words or ideas and passing them off as one's own. Teppei has definitely done that, and the burden of guilt is something he very much had to bear. He never touched the money he'd earned, still eating cup noodles or even skimming cabbage garnish at a celebration barbecue for the success of his story. But even the act of him passing off White Knight as his own is something I can understand. Due to events happening outside of the scope of a perceived reality through time travel, he did something much more believable in assuming that the story came to him in a dream. As a creator, yes, I've had dreams with ideas I still have jotted down for potential use as stories. And I doubt I'm alone in this. Teppei's course of action is one that, stepping back, makes complete and total sense to me, even if at the end of the day he did something wrong and knows it well. And I think it's kind of absurd to expect characters to never do anything wrong, especially considering the story understands this fact and handles it well. The first thing he wants to do is quit because he knows it's unearned, but what pulls him back is fans of White Knight. This image, this page, gets to me on another level. A creator who is ultimately regurgitating the work of another instead of making something themselves, sometimes even having feelings of wanting to stop, but ultimately deciding to keep going because of the people who get a lot out of what he's doing. This page absolutely nails personal feelings of mine and remains as my favorite page in the manga for that very reason. Even if what I did is transformative, while what Teppei did for the large part of the start of the series wasn't, it was still necessary for the series to function and every action taken around it makes sense. Even after doing the bare minimum of wrong actions to kickstart the story, Teppei is still dragged down mentally by his choices and hangups despite taking the steps to alleviate it the best he can, which is necessary for the audience to still be able to get behind him. While I do have more to say on this front, to put a nail in the plagiarism thing, at the end of the day, applying real-world laws and morality to fictional concepts and storytelling and claiming the work of fiction is trying to justify that real-world thing is completely and utterly absurd. Clear concessions are being made for the core thrust of the story, a compelling and unique idea at that, and it wouldn't be able to function in a way to get its messages across, or be as instantly interesting in its unique premise if not for that concession. And with every step being taken to address the main character's guilt, I fail to understand how anyone can say that the story is trying to promote or glorify these behaviors unless they have no context into the manga industry as a whole. But anyway, while the story was kickstarted through Teppei's actions, and taking on a work of fiction after the death of its author, rather than instances of plagiarism, it's in actuality more comparable to a different kind of ghostwriting. In April of 2021, a novel by the author of Gothic is set to be released, adapting manuscripts made by Tezuka shortly before his death, in the form of a sequel novel to his manga Phoenix. Similarly, after Ken Ishikawa passed away 4 years into the publication of Getter Robo Arc, a year or so later, Naoto Tsushima would use drafts and notes of his to draw Getter Robo Hien, the Earth Suicide. And this is merely scratching the surface. A manga does not only belong to its creator. While in professional spaces, adaptations and spin-offs will have the original creator's seal of approval, and very rarely will something be shot down by the original creator, that doesn't mean they are the only one in control. To use a mammoth like One Piece for example, while the primary work is one story with a small and continually changing creative team of assistants and editors under one primary vision, it's also the core of a franchise which includes numerous spin-offs and adaptations that include even more overseeing voices and control. For the anime, even excluding Oda and Toei, there's Shueisha, the manga publisher, Fuji TV, the broadcasting station, ADK, the advertising agency, and sponsors, all of which have a pull with the anime itself. And things like merchandising, Oda does not sign off on every single thing as those production rights rest elsewhere. As such, if an author passes away, while their family has say on what happens to their works, there are multiple voices and even industry pressures to consider in regards to the choices they may make. And all that is not even bringing up a thriving doujinshi market, of which pornographic materials are only a fraction, but a large amount of the works are based in other properties. While copyright is taken much more seriously in regards to professionals, for example, Osamatsu-san's first episode not being sold or re-aired due to the amount of parodies, doujins are bought and sold with much more freedom, which is sharply different to Western markets, where even a small creator trying to distribute works freely might risk legal action if the serial numbers aren't filed off. Now, how does this apply to Ghostwriter? Well, with a foot in the door, I can further illustrate the picture of a massive entertainment industry where taking on someone else's work, be it through adaptation, spin-off, or fan work, isn't unusual whatsoever. And that's without even getting into derivative works. Authors will gladly talk about their influences, and from the perspective of someone in the industry, they're going to notice. For a magazine as big as Jump, which can see 30 new manuscripts from aspiring authors a day, the amount of common and derivative works the editors have to sift through is unimaginably huge. In an interview with the editor-in-chief of both Shonen Jump and Shonen Champion, Jump's editor Nakano mentioned how many new submissions were including anthropomorphized animals likely inspired by Champion's Beastars. The perspective of someone in the industry would be very different than that of a reader who only gets to experience those vetted works that make it through the selection process, whether they go on to succeed or fail. Regarding authors taking the works of others to publish their own, I want to quote Makoto Tezuka, son of famed Osamu Tezuka. Naoki Urasawa, before the publication of Pluto, sought approval from the son of the man who wrote Astro Boy, also called Adam, the series he aimed to reimagine. Tezuka initially turned him down, but Urasawa persisted. Upon finally seeing his pitch for what he intended to do with Pluto, Tezuka stated that Urasawa's initial designs and sketches betrayed a certain deference to Tezuka's work. Adam would be immediately recognizable by anyone as Adam, and Gaish had the same face that Tezuka used in his original manga. He then asked that Urasawa shouldn't imitate Tezuka. He wanted to see something that was really Urasawa's own work. In order to make Pluto, to make a manga that lived up to Tezuka, Urasawa, already an acclaimed author who had drawn Yawara, Monster, and 20th Century Boys, still needed to be reminded to draw something only he could draw. And given that I first read Pluto all the way through without even knowing it adapted a story arc of Astro Boy, though I would have recognized Astro Boy himself had I seen him, I have to suggest that he utterly succeeded in making a manga that was undeniably his, even if the foundations rest in a body of work that was not originally his own. The lesson that even an acclaimed manga author needed to learn, if not relearn, was something those younger authors submitting series resembling Beastars similarly had to learn. And in both we could see the struggle of Teppei. When he met failure in imitating the artwork of the future Aino, after asking the past version, she told Teppei that this white knight is his. Only by drawing his own artwork, rather than an imitation, was he able to satisfy himself and Aino. In turn, stepping even slightly closer to living up to the deceased author's work, he aimed to finish by defeating the younger version in that field. With a manga he then had to continue himself with no blueprint to fall back on. But of course, he failed. Aino, in effect, while echoing his own emptiness, is the extreme example of the hypothetical manga author who thinks only of the audience. Focusing purely on pleasing the readers, she put all of herself into her work, dying no matter what the time-ruling entity tried to do. As someone who wrote manga only for others, to neglect herself was the natural result. Teppei, similarly sharing her desire to please as many readers as possible, aimed to do so through finishing White Knight and save Aino's life. But his ability to imitate fell short. In writing White Knight, a story originally made to please everyone, but now being made for the sake of saving Aino, he created an incongruity in purpose that could never hope to match Aino in her pure, self-destructive drive. Trying to live up to Aino and match her goal, while at the same time making a concession and drawing for one specific person above the audience as a whole, he was doomed to fail. So in the space of infinite time, after drawing story after story, he finally arrived at the answer, not trying to beat Aino at her own game, but finally understanding why he'd been trying to defeat her and capitalizing on that, drawing for Aino first and foremost, beyond anything, beyond anyone else. The first message of Time Paradox Ghostwriter I want to express is that the art is not more important than the artist. While he committed plagiarism to start down this road, by drawing White Knight he came to finally understand what he wanted to say, and in turn was able to draw a manga to tell Aino what she had to hear. She needed to draw not for the world, but for herself, and through that, he finally broke the shackles of fate. While short-lived, I found Ghostwriter to be particularly compelling, and in it, multiple messages I believe would be helpful to budding creative types. The second of which being the need to create for yourself, as the importance of artist over art can easily be neglected by self-serving fans, and in turn lead to artists who feel the same way and undergo such a painful sacrifice, especially in a harsh production medium such as manga. But what struck me the most came more implicitly, from Teppei himself. Though he was a hollow person who drew derivative story after derivative story, he didn't give up, and kept drawing for an impossible amount of time. Through that, he finally found what he drew for and what he wanted to say. Many creators start out with derivative works, yet I believe that through continued creation and betterment one can come to find a story only they can make. It's through that diligence and willingness to create that Teppei and Aino continued to connect, and continued to draw. And even if this story is over, I hope to see what Kenji Ichima and Tsunehiro Date might bring to the pages of Jump in the future. As always, I would like to thank my patrons, such as Tengun, Brorike, Bayanort, Justice Man, Offline But Not, Sam Bellmeyer, Thanks Nitrorad, Mohammed Hakim, Gloogle, Flarbu, Dojo32161, and Brian Nesseth. Thank you for watching.